The hippie to the hip hip hopper, you don't stop. Rock it out, baby, rubber to the boogity bang bang, the boogity.
Hi, my name is Samantha Hernandez, and I chose to do hip hop culture. The reason I chose to do this topic is because I've grown up around hip hop and listened to it on a daily basis. Some of the artists have influenced me in many ways with their philosophical teachings. The purpose of this research was really to examine society's views of hip-hop and how it came about into this world and for what reasons, and also to show how hip-hop's culture influenced and changed the American culture. Instead of distinguishing each other by race, the focus shifted to the type of music someone listened to. Hip-hop is what brought this country together at a time when the country was starting to divide. It allows for people to express themselves artistically and to voice their opinions in a healthy way. The culture of hip-hop translates and flows easily between people, which is why it has been so significant to the American culture and people. And so the questions that really guide this study are, what is hip-hop and its key elements, and how has it influenced the society that we live in today?
Let's do it.
So where did the hip-hop term come from exactly? Keith Wiggins, who was a member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, was teasing a friend who had just signed up to serve in the U.S. Army. There was a time when he was mimicking the rhythm of marching soldiers by scat singing hip-hop, hip-hop. He later used the phrase in a performance. Then the name began to be used by disco musicians in a derogatory way to identify a new type of music being performed by MCs and DJs. But before long, its negative connotation wore off and the name stuck. The key individuals and groups credited with popularizing the term in the late 70s and early 80s include the Sugar Hill Gang, Lovebug Starski, DJ Hollywood, and Africa Bambaataa. Hip-hop combines two slang terms. Hip, which means in the now, has been a part of African American language since the late 19th century. Hop represents the hopping movement shown by hip-hop performers. Since hip-hop's emergence from South Bronx, New York City in the 1970s, it has influenced many other types of music to come along and manage to shape local, national, regional, and global issues. Instead of simply telling about the issues, music makes certain situations more clear and also evokes emotions in people. It is a culture fully on its own, and just like any other, it has evolved and expanded over continents and oceans over time. Hip-hop was created as a way to represent communities that have been quiet for so long, and tells a story of what living in America is really like. Because really, no high school kid today, unless he or she does serious research, is going to connect hip-hop with social protests or political struggle, even though it was born out of that. Hip-hop culture was created by the African American community, but it has expanded and survived because it was able to cross boundaries and speak to the white community also. Even today, 70% of hip-hop's audience is composed of white people. It is an art form that is adaptable, as it essentially involves creating something out of nothing. Hip-hop is a culture that not only has a grasp on art, music, and fashion, it dives deeper into the reality of politics and major societal issues. It exposed racial tensions and showed the brutality many people face on a daily basis. By exposing the truth to society, hip-hop was able to intertwine two cultures and become a part of the American culture.
Peep this, lottie-dottie, we like to party, we don't cause trouble, we don't bother nobody.
Hip-hop created a language that was unique. This language system was modeled after the secret language created by slaves to keep certain things hidden from their masters. This same trick of having a secret language influenced the hip-hop culture. Terms are continuously being created and added to this urban language. Slang is sometimes created as a part of a secret code or as a way to make a lyric sound more coherent. The words that hip-hop artists make up may end up becoming so mainstream that the same rap subgroup that created it will end up removing it from the good books because it becomes lame and overused. The culture moves on anyway to create new terms, since hip-hop relies on humorous insider language to separate its hip-hop heads and fans from those known as bandwagon fans or even your parents, so they don't understand exactly what is meant by the word. hip-hop, there was disco, but this music wasn't urban or underground enough, and it didn't speak to all the different communities in the United States. People would come together at block parties and park jams. They'd bring 2 turntables and create different beats that they could dance to. DJing, which was known as the manipulation of pre-recorded music, has been around for about 47 years now. DJ Kool Herc, who was born in Kingston, Jamaica, emigrated to New York in 1967, in which he hosted huge street parties and introduced the Jamaican sound system DJ. He led party rituals in American culture. In 1976, Grand Wizard Theodore accidentally invented scratching after bumping into his turntables while avoiding his mother's pleas to turn down the volume. This led to the beginning of breakdancing and popping in the 80s. Africa Bambaataa and his Zulu nation were the originators of breakdancing. They were made up of former gang members, but were very much dedicated to their craft of teaching youth self-pride and cultural awareness through music and dance. Break dancers usually took the floor once the break beats were played by DJs, and a breakbeat was a section of a song where the rapper takes a break and lets the instrumental flow on. This provided break dancers something to step to while they took their place on the dance floor to battle against other dance crews.
We beat to rap, what key beat to lock, but I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that. I'm cool like
DJing and breakdancing drove those with artistic capabilities to begin expressing themselves openly in public, like on subways, buildings, anywhere they knew the public would see their visuals. Graffiti is like Aboriginal art, just like all the other elements of hip-hop, in which they all express themselves through those forms and tell their story through those forms. This form of expression was compared to Picasso's artwork. Philadelphia writers Cornbread and Cool Oral started the modern-day graffiti movement in the 1960s, where they marked anything on sight, such as subways and train yards with markers, pens, and spray paint. Tagging also began in New York City in the 1970s. This graffiti is not to be confused with the tagging that gangs.
Hip-hop hooray! Ho! Hey! Ho! Hey!
The sixth element of hip-hop is the unique dress codes that have always defined members of the culture. Clothes expresses individuality, but the fashion staples that show up in global youth culture dress codes usually have a functional or political purpose. The wearing of baggy, oversized clothes is rooted in the 1970s, where African American and Latin American New York City households, where disposable income restrictions dictated that clothing be passed down from one sibling to another. These natural occurring circumstances created the perfect foil for graffiti writers in this emerging subculture, where a baggy hooded sweatshirt could be used to hide your identity when illegally tagging property. It also helped early breakdancers ease the friction on the surfaces of the original cardboard box when they were doing a head spin or a windmill. And lastly, the jewelry accessories, or more so known as the bling bling, has always been a symbol of power for the youth, saying to a world that devalues black communities that I am a somebody. Jewelry was a symbol of perceived wealth and demonstrated that black people are descendants of African kings and queens, not the hood dwellers that Fox News made them out to be. Because hip-hop's audience and fan base was becoming integrated, corporations finally saw hip-hop as being profitable. In 1986, when Run DMC came out with the track, My Adidas, it influenced the fashion industry because companies were learning that by making endorsement deals with these artists, their sales would skyrocket. These endorsement deals were just the beginning of the economic power shift this art form was going to have. In 1988, Dapper Dan became famously known as a neighborhood tailor that would redesign luxury brands into clothes that the community would feel comfortable wearing. He would cut up Gucci or Louis Vuitton bags and redesign them into being clothes. Dapper Dan is responsible for creating culture fashion that athletes, artists, and regular people could afford. Harlem, however, was coming up with their own styles. Everything was 5 times bigger and loose. The media imperialists tend to project images of mostly male artists wearing oversized clothes without explaining the context. What many don't know is that this was the fashion in Harlem, and it grew out of there and spread. Tommy Hilfiger was one of the many that was able to capture the idea of urban fashion. It became so popular that it was no longer a brand, but a trend because he catered to what the hip-hop culture wanted. Even though hip-hop was evidently present in the streets of Harlem, as it made its way to the suburbs, suburban kids wanted to dress like hip-hop artists. This was breaking down the barrier that because you belonged to a certain class, you had to dress a certain way. These fans made it known that they wanted to be acknowledged for who they were and not who they were trying to be. They identified with the culture because it is a culture about struggle. Artists in the 80s began setting fashion statements, and in the 90s they became entrepreneurs. Russell Simmons and Tommy Hilfiger inspired P. Diddy to create Sean John, which kept both the voice and the image of hip-hop. In 2004, when he won the Menswear Designer of the Year award, this opened the gates for more black designers and hip-hop fashion. Artists began changing their style, which potentially hurt some designers and brands because hip-hop artists weren't wearing baggy clothes anymore. It wasn't about wearing sweatsuits and sneakers anymore. It was about being in designer clothes, suits, and being taken more seriously. Another element that contributed to the hip-hop culture was film, television, and other mediums. Melvin Van Peebles was one of the first filmmakers that finally portrayed black men as the heroes or good guys instead of it always being the stereotypical tall, white, and handsome. Black exploitation movies, which focus on black actors as a leading role, were beginning to emerge in the 70s. These movies emphasized that black men could be heroes and children can look up to them as role models. He became the youngest filmmaker to get nominated for an Oscar for his film Boys in the Hood. Hip-hop became a sort of common ground for the two cultures to merge into one another. TV shows began implementing both Caucasian and African American characters. These shows were successful and sent out the message that all children and every single person can succeed and grow up to be someone important. Artists stopped trying to conform to what the white community wanted and focus on their needs. After MTV refused to show black artists, a program called Video Music Box was created. This channel catered to the hip-hop community. Because of its fluidity and availability, hip-hop was spreading across the nation, from East Coast to the West. The images of the American culture were beginning to change on TV. In the late 80s and early 90s, Arsenio Hall impacted late night and put hip-hop on a bigger global scale. He was the first black late-night host who interviewed hip-hop artists and had them on his show. With Arsenio Hall, a window to Black America was open. Hip-hop artists would perform at the end of the show, which was a breakthrough for TV and put Fox on the map. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's Will Smith became the first hip-hop artist to star in a primetime TV series. The show had guests that were hip-hop artists, which was important because they weren't generally on primetime TV. Mainstream TV became immersed in hip-hop, and it became popular because both The Cosby Show and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air elevated it. In 1993, Vibe magazine expansively covered hip-hop, R&B, and arts of the culture as a whole. It got advertising from mainstream brands to support the culture, and people began realizing that hip-hop was becoming a growth industry. With this exposure, the birth of new hip-hop labels began appearing. These labels fabricated a new American dream. Being young, black, and fabulous, and having a hard work ethic is the aspiration that is presented.
I got a dream.
One day,
We gonna work it out.
one day.
We gonna work it out.
I want to love like me thinking of you, thinking of me, thinking of you type love, or me telling my friends more than I've ever admitted to myself about how I feel about you type love, or hating how jealous you are, but loving how much you want me all to yourself type love, or seeing how your first name just sounds so good next to my last name, and shit, I wanted to see how far I could get without calling you, and I barely made it out of my garage. See, I want a love that makes me wait until she falls asleep, then wonder if she's dreaming about us being in love type love, or who loves the other more, or what she's doing at this exact moment, or slow dancing in the middle of our apartment to the music of our hearts, closing my eyes and imagining how a love good could just hurt so much when she's not there, and shit, I love not knowing where this love is headed type love. And check this, I want to place those little post-it notes all around the house so she never forgets how much I love her type love, then not have enough ink in my pen to write all there is to love about her type love, and hope I make her feel as good as she makes me feel. And I want to deal with my friends making fun of me the way I made fun of them when they went through the same kind of love type love. Only difference is, this is one of those real love type loves. And just like in high school, I want to spend hours on the phone not saying shit, and then fall asleep, and then wake up with her right next to me, and smell her all up in my covers type love. And I want to try counting the ways I love her, then lose count in the middle just so I have to start all over again. And I want to celebrate one of those 1 month anniversaries, even though they ain't really anniversaries, but doing it just because it makes her happy type love. And check this. I want to fall in love with the melody the phone plays when the number's dialed into it type love, then talk to you until I lose my breath. She leaves me breathless, but with the expanding of my lungs, I inhale all of her back into me. I want a love that makes me need to change my cell phone calling plan to something that allows me to talk to her longer, because in all honesty, I want to avoid one of them high cell phone bill type loves. And I want a love that makes me regret how small my hands are. I mean, the lines of my palms don't give me enough time to love you as long as I'd like to type love. And I want a love that makes me stutter just thinking about how strong this love is type love. And I want a love that makes me want to cut off all my hair. Well, maybe not all of the hair. Maybe like I cut the split ends and trim my mustache, but it would still be a symbol of how strong my love is for her. Check this. I kind of feel comfortable now, so I even be fantasizing about walking out on a green light, just dying to get hit by a car, just so I could lose my memory, get transported to some third world country just to get treated, and somehow meet up again with you so I can fall in love with you in a different language and see if it still feels the same type love. I want a love that's as unexplainable as she is, but I'm married, so she's going to be the one I share this love with. Thank you.
The next element, slam poetry, is actually one of my favorites because I've always been fond of it and always wanted to attend one of the poetry slams. Slam poetry and spoken word were subcategories that emerged from the art of rap. It was another form of self-expression. Spoken word artist Ursula Rucker stated that female rappers begin to view hip-hop as a legitimate way to express themselves and build a career. It became a popular outlet, especially for females. It was a way of defending roots with music, not trying to imitate another culture. This style of poetry has a rhythmic fashion and was very effective in getting an individual's voice out in the open during the civil rights era and other movements that encouraged our freedom of speech to come alive. Another element of hip-hop is rapping or MCing. Music has always played a strong role in the struggle of apartheid. It was a tool that brought oppressed blacks from Soweto and other townships across the country into a united front of harmonious protest. Rap music now provides a newly developed outlet for social messages in a more urgent, critical fashion. Rap roots lie in New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Jamaica, but its true geographical birthplace borough of hip-hop is in the South Bronx and Queensbridge. The conditions that created rap are poverty, unemployment, and class welfare. It spoke out against an oppressive system. As politicians increasingly refuse to address genuine social inequalities, rappers speak about the beauty and ugliness of the world with equal candor, putting up a sharp mirror to reality. What some politicians are scared to say, rappers and hip-hop artists preach lyrically. Pre-rap music inspiration comes from the Last Poets, composed of lyricists Abiodun Oyewole, Umar bin Hassan, Alafia Pudim and drum player Nilaja, who got together in New York during the American Civil Rights era. Their street poetry, fusing spoken word diatribe with singing and chanting, delivered messages about African Americans' self-awareness. In 1984, when Run DMC was gaining momentum, artists realized how important it was to collaborate with artists of different races. Run DMC was the first to collaborate with rock legend Aerosmith. By recording with them, rap was revamping rock and bringing it back to life. It lyrically showed how two cultures were coming together to break down walls. This new music wasn't just for certain people. It was fluid. People believed that rap was going to be the official teenage music, and in 1986, the Beastie Boys became widely known. There was a natural relationship between the black and Jewish community. Because the Beastie Boys were white, hip-hop was now moving into the suburbs and the community was more accepting of them. What these artists started doing was the Beastie Boys would go on tour and they would bring along artists to introduce their audience and fan base. The Beastie Boys would introduce LL Cool J and Public Enemy to their fans. Run DMC would do the same, except they would introduce white artists to their fan base. They began integrating music, and they were going to continue until their fans saw past racial barriers and accepted the music for what it was, art. Shortly after the Beastie Boys introduced Public Enemy, there was a breakthrough in addressing reality. Hip-hop spoke about things that weren't publicly talked about. Gangster rap evolved, and hip-hop artists were telling the truth about segregation, the violence experienced, shootings, rapes, police brutality, and much more. Hip-hop made America's problems known by giving a safe glimpse of the hood. Although many of the most touching raps in the history of music form are less about bling and more about the beautification of inner city streets, the more recent rappers have emphasized on the importance of luxury. This has created some controversy because rap was created to be a voice for voiceless racialized groups and to speak out on pertinent social issues. Hip-hop has the potential to heal communities. It is the news outlet about what is happening, and it's the only thing that speaks to our mind, heart, and soul. Every word that an MC spits, you see a picture, and it comes out of urgency. MCs are our emotional leaders. If you go to a place that is suffering, that's what you'll hear. Hip-hop culture not only affected the American society, it bled its way through to other music genres like rock, punk, country, and rap. By expanding, hip-hop made its way into the suburbs. Caucasian teenagers and artists acted as an olive branch and introduced hip-hop to the white community. Both cultures were able to come together and talk about hip-hop, which broke down racial barriers. Hip-hop educated the world about the urban experience. It was an American culture produced by African Americans. The global takeover of hip-hop became a lifestyle, not a trend. Tolerance for the hip-hop culture is still growing, and the integration is still taking place. Hip-hop has had a huge impact on politics. Artists got involved in political campaigns and inspired voters. Hip-hop became bigger than just music. Allowing hip-hop artists to support political campaigns inspired the youth to think about their voices in politics. This contributed remarkably to Obama's successful election. The hip-hop culture was able to see through that a black president was put in office. Even Obama uses hip-hop language and gestures such as the fist bump and brushing off his shoulder. Hip-hop created the multiracial generation that was able to make it possible for him to win. So in conclusion, the success of hip-hop illustrates how far the culture has come. Every new age creates new possibilities, and I feel we're at the verge of some fresh energy. Hip-hop has the ability to open many doors and strives to overcome the system. Like Barack Obama once said, the question is, imagine something different. Imagine communities that aren't torn up by violence. Imagine communities where we're respecting our women, where knowledge and reading and academic excellence are valued. Art can't just be a rear view mirror. It should have a highlight out there, according to where we need to go. So during this research project, I have learned a lot about the hip-hop culture and its major impact on the world, and how it continues to influence our societies today in several ways. I have learned a lot about myself and how I look at life and the people around me simply through the lyrics and songs that are so powerful that they help in times of need. Something I discovered about book learning in comparison to real-world learning was that I was able to obtain more knowledge from books and apply it to my own personal learning to help alter the experience because it was more hands-on. This research project relates to my academic studies in high school because the hip-hop culture has made my educational experience possible. Because I believe that if the hip-hop movement had not happened, schools would possibly still be segregated. It also helped me figure out my strengths and weaknesses with writing heavy research papers. By learning more about the roots of hip-hop, I was able to appreciate its history and the glorious ways it brought the nation closer together. So this really concludes my project. Thank you for listening.